Hi folks, how are you doing? This is your favorite host, sjsrana, Surendrajit Singh Rana, reporting from my hometown Chandigarh, which is 150 miles north of New Delhi. Today we're going to discuss a lot of topics from sun flaring up to major storm developing at India, Bay of Bengal, to COVID-19, and also we're going to discuss mostly on how India GDP is faring up, and further we're going to see how Australia is introducing new laws for the sexual consent, safety of women and female folks. So all these are coming up and much more, and this is May 25th, 12:21 hours UTC time. So folks, we see a lot of things which have recently come up to the changing geopolitical ball games as well as the geomagnetic changing of the earth. Things which are correlating is quite surprising, how things which happens in a weather pattern, in a weather crisis, are now all self-evident, like what we call as Mother Nature wrath, or people call it the karma backing, reckoning back, whatever you may call it, but things are changing quite swiftly, and the weather crisis is reporting the situation of the earth. Now we see currently a view graph here of India facing Yaas. Yes, this cyclone, a violent cyclone, is named as Yaas, and this is the second such storm which is to hit India within a week. Earlier was Bay of Gujarat. Now this is packing up quite a huge speed, and we see by Wednesday early morning it's going to hit Odisha, the state, and then it'll further go into the depression mode towards the Bihar and upper states of Uttar Pradesh in India, which is northern part of India. Will touch also Nepal, which is another country nation, and Bhutan, the areas of that. Obviously it'll touch Bangladesh. So this storm is basically considered as a catastrophic storm because it is rated as very, very violent, and mostly I see this storm will be pounding on the areas where there are Indian ISRO, which is the Space Research Organization, and Indian missiles launch pad, which is in Odisha. So those areas will be hit. So I guess Indian Air Force will be seen as a major movement trying to safeguard their assets, their missiles, whatnot, at the silos at the Odisha state. And we'll also see how the contingency plan is working. It's already been alerted that a lot of people have been displaced and they have been put up into the camps, temporary camps. So India is already preparing up big time for this second cyclone within a week, and we hope this time doesn't cause that much of casualty as it caused in the earlier storm. So moving on quickly, we're going to see how we are faring up with the COVID-19, and Afghanistan is now reporting India variant, COVID-19 variant, which is B.1.617.2. Yes, this variant has been rated as one of the very fearsome and very virulent. Also, it's known as very contagious, 50% more contagious than other variants, and it's been reported in over 44 nations. Yes, folks, it is quite spread sporadically and quite instantly. And Afghanistan is a new country nation which has started reporting COVID-19, and this India variant, India COVID-19 variant, is quite surprising. And the Guardian reported this, and they started research on this, like how much more it's going to be there, where we'll have some sort of vaccination towards prevention for this India COVID-19 variant, which is B.1.617.2. And this does seems to be something of great concern, because unless these variants or mutations come down under the vaccination, India may not come out of the fatalities mode or the rapid infection which it has seen. Now, for the first time after several weeks, India has reported which is below 2 lakh, or which is you can call 0.2 million numbers of COVID cases, which is reported for May 25th, and fatality still happens to be circling around 3,500 or 3,500. It is down from 4,000 earlier, which was reported yesterday and day before, and it's been going on as a trend for almost a week or 2 weeks. Now we see there's something which is developing basically on the vaccination side, which we see that India is trying to pursue the matters, because so far India has only vaccinated 200 million population out of 1400 million population. And if you compare it with China, which is having 1400 million population, China is already having almost 500 million people vaccinated. So China, compared with India, which is a neighbor, is quite advanced, and it has been taking very proactive effects towards vaccination, whereas India seems to be a little lagging behind, and there seems to be no other reason than, you can say, the general lethargy of the Indian government. And Indian government is very lousy in holding the international press conference when it comes to a disaster. So you see, COVID-19 has been a complete disaster for India, second wave, and all these cases which are coming up from new variants, and also this mucormycosis, you see this black fungus which is infecting many patients. It's been blamed on many of the reasons could be steroids, which India doctors are using sporadically and indiscriminately. Also, it has been blamed on the oxygen cylinders, industrial oxygen cylinders being used for the patient. So many causes, but this is also not under control. More than 900 fatalities have been reported, cases have been reported, huge number of cases reported. And it seems to be something where India government has to take some proactive action to control this mucormycosis. And this disease is spreading into different various forms. They're also reporting some yellow fungus. They're also reporting some white fungus cases. So all these cases are adding up to the overall casualties or the fatalities for India. And I guess many factors, because India also has one of the most toxic air pollution, and it has been reported many times. I've been reporting, if you see this view graph, you can see India stands apart in the whole global sphere, where it is having particularly like the particulars 2.5 and ppm, parts per million 10, which is quite huge. And now we see what's going on with you can say there's a info war going on. India government is cracking down heavily on Facebook, Google, and specifically Twitter, where it's trying to put up some intermediary rules, which it has implemented it sometime in February. Now it's reporting that a lot of these companies, which are social media giants, must be adhering to it, else it's going to crack down heavily on these media. Specifically, this new thing has been stirred by India government, because based on some political ball games, which is between the party of the Congress and the BJP, the ruling party, where they have figured out one tweet or several tweets by some of the political outfit, where they have labeled, specifically they're taking up the toolkit issue of the COVID-19, and they're also taking up the issue of labeling it as a Modi strain or an India strain. They've taken it hard, and they have gone down on the crackdown mode. But this seems to be something where Twitter is getting involved for no good reason, because Twitter should be non-partisan or non-biased towards any of such political ball games, or even what government has to say, unless it's something which is violating completely the policy of Twitter. It should not come to picture. But somehow India government in the Delhi, had the cops raid the offices of Twitter, and they were cracking down heavily because of this incident. And the incident came after the BJP and the Congress had a tussle over the manipulation, or they call it a forgery, on the tweet. and this things is unfolding right now, and we'll come to the crux of the matter by a day or two, where we'll come to know what manipulated media or tags or what were there as forged tweet which has put up India government onto the war front with Twitter. So anyways guys, the Twitter has been in the center piece for a lot of allegations of suspending accounts of human rights activists. This is another clip we're going to watch, how Twitter has been blamed for being biased towards black people. So surprising enough, this is not something news to me, because in 2019 my account, which is @sjsrana, was suspended by Twitter for no good reason. They could never come up or could explain me what policy violation I did, because my account was quite active. I was doing all the philanthropy, human rights work, and my tweets were quite active. I was registering more than 1,000% gain almost every week, and Twitter could never come back to me on what grounds they suspended my account. This is the last email I got from their support on my sjsrana@yahoo.com for my account @sjsrana, and this is a matter which again brings limelight to the Twitter policy of being, manipulative, or being something where they try to play games or part with the ruling party or ruling power of the nation to suppress, oppress, repress, and put a gag order on the human rights or free speech. So folks, I have gone through this first-hand experience in 2019, so I know much about Twitter, and Twitter, to my understanding, is not having good ethics and moral grounds to stand up to raise the voice against the governments that try to suppress, oppress, repress, the regimes which try to do it. And India is specifically known to be very notorious in trying to put gag orders on free speech and free information, because it's already having information warfare with a lot many people. If you look at the farmer protesting in India, they've suspended almost more than 500 people account, and for no good reason. Then they reinstated it later on, learning that there was huge amount of pressure. Those farmers who were protesting in India are basically not fighting for any nothing which is against the government, but they're just saying some laws which are not favoring them for their produce. So you can see how India government is reacting for such small things. What is going behind the scene is quite conspicuous, and we got to see how things are going to shape up. And I see a lot of things which will uncover in time to come, which is the month of June, because I can predict this factor from lot many areas where they're going to see a lot of things which are going to be unraveled to us, which were mystified by many governments, hiding, concealing, disinformation campaign. All these things are going to come up. I've been fighting this battle for almost 10 years with the government and the stooges, India's stooges especially. You see, my passport was denied to me, renewal of my passport for almost 10 months for no good reason. I was also implicated in false and fabricated cases. These are the cases by two of the people who they put up as a bait, and then they tried to put me into the corner, into a fix, and they lost completely in the courts of India. So folks, I tell you, it's quite different to be a human rights activist or even a philanthropy who is a truth teller in India. They have to face a lot of different things also a lot of hate crimes, a lot of accusations, false accusations, and your life is constricted. You're like living in a cardboard box. I usually don't interact a lot with the people. I keep even my house over here location locked up, because you never know what hate crimes you're going to face. Okay, quickly jumping on the topic, Australia is introducing very good news for the female folks, introducing new laws for the consent. Yes, this is for the sexual assault laws, and they're changing it to explicit consent now. Basically, whole world is fed up. It's not just Australia. Females in Canada, America, India, they're all fed up, and these laws are much required. You can see this
Saxon
video
Mullins
clip
was just
how,
18 when she
alpha
froze
males are,
during what she says
manipulating
was a
females over the
non-consensual
consent,
sexual
and they try to
encounter
then put a
behind
sexual
a
assault or
King's
sexual
Cross
battery over the
nightclub.
females where there is no
A
explicit
judge found
consent.
that
Just
her
have a
lack
watch
of
on this clip and
resistance
you'll
meant it was
understand.
reasonable for the accused to believe she was consenting. It was this case that triggered a review into the state's consent laws.
My determination is to make sure that a case like that never arises again.
In recent months, pressure for change has been growing. Now the New South Wales government has answered the call, announcing a shift to what's called an affirmative model of consent. It means clear consent must be obtained, so people can no longer assume someone means yes just because they're not saying no.
We are now leading the way in this space, and hopefully other states can look to New South Wales and enact their own reforms.
So how will it work in real life? The government says it comes down to common sense.
We're not expecting some kind of lengthy contract or disclaimer. You can indicate consent by saying something, or it might be a facial expression with a gesture.
Currently, only 3% of sexual assaults reported to police result in a criminal conviction. Police are hoping these reforms will change that.
It is a grey area. It has been a challenge for police. It has been a challenge for the justice system.
Campaigners have welcomed the changes.
It doesn't have to be about killing the moment. It doesn't have to be not a sort of a sexy thing to do. It's really a matter of checking in.
Some are worried the reforms go too far and could result in an injustice for someone who is autistic or has an intellectual disability.
That person, because of his or her difficulties with mental functioning, might not think to ask the question, are you consenting?
A question the government hopes will soon become routine. Ursula Malone, ABC News, Sydney.
So, well, we can understand the reason why females are frustrated. There is no good reason. The censorship is a tool used when lies loses its power. Recently there was an incident, I tell you about the consent, where, it is just youths who are just trying to encircle a 13 years old minor girl. Just based on some consent, they offered some Indian sweet to them, and if the girl accepts it, they think, okay, it's a consent to have a sexual activity. And later on, they were found gang raping or a sexual battery over this minor girl. So this is quite pathetic and very traumatic experience for the females in India. Specifically, they are misusing the metaphor consent. Metaphor consent is something where, they have come up with the idea of, let's say standing at a location, or, interpreting the gestures made by a female as a consent. See, the metaphors, consent is a complete wreckage, and it's a traumatic experience for the females. This is something which must be avoided, and the laws in India are also required, because there are no such laws. The alpha males, or you call it a sexual active hyperactive predators population in India, are openly exploiting this clause of metaphor, that whenever there's a case, when a female raises in the police station that group of males gang raped her, specifically the minor girls, they always put up that, okay, no, she had a consent, because because she did such gestures, or she was expecting us to stand here and she allowed us to stand there. So those sort of metaphor things are a complete wreckage in India, and that's why India females are reporting 15 minutes sexual assault. Every 15 minutes a female is sexually assaulted in India, and India needs to have explicit
In a radical
consent law,
legal
or else
overhaul,
it's going
accused
to be a
rapists
complete
can now be convicted
wreckage
if
in
they
India
are
for females.
unable to show they took active steps to obtain consent for sex. It's designed to give victims a smoother path to justice, but concerns have been raised about how the new laws will work in practice.
Opening the door for victims to come forward.
This is a really amazing day that we've all waited a really long time for.
Consent reforms advocate Saxon Mullins, whose own sexual assault case sparked the review, alongside the Attorney-General as he announced the changes.
There cannot be consent unless the party in question has said something or done something to communicate consent.
Prosecutors would have to prove the accused rapist or sexual offender did not take active steps to gain consent, and that the victim did not consent through actions or words.
The clearest example would be where explicit words are used. Would you like to make love? It may be that in response to that question, party B makes a hand gesture, nodding of a head.
But some legal experts have concerns about how it would work in real-world practice.
You are going to have he said, I said, and there's going to be a lot of cross-examination about what the actual position is.
Only 3% of sexual assault cases reported to police in New South Wales end in a conviction. Police say these new laws give them clarity and victims a greater chance at justice. Authorities hope it'll start a wider community conversation about sex and consent. Miley Hogan, 7 News.
Who knew what and when about Brittany Higgins' rape allegation before she went public still isn't entirely clear.
I'm not happy about the fact that it was not brought to my attention, and I can assure you people know that.
The Prime Minister insists he found out when the story broke, but some of his staff knew well before that. The PM's Department Secretary is investigating and says his report is nearly complete.
It'll finish as soon as possible, probably weeks, not days, and certainly not months.
Phil Gaetschen's apparent lack of urgency frustrating Labor, as much as his refusal to say who or how many people he's interviewed.
With the appropriate
it is a cover-up of the cover-up. It's like a triple cover-up.
Labor's pursuit continuing in question time over a separate inquiry into the actions of the Prime Minister's office.
Can the Prime Minister now finally tell us, did his office seek to undermine Brittany Higgins' loved ones?
My Chief of Staff found in the negative and I tabled the report.
The 4-page document clearing the PM staff, concluding, I do not make a finding that negative briefing of the sort alleged has taken place.
And it's exactly as I said it would be. No wonder it's publicly released, because it exonerates the Prime Minister and his office.
Thank you, Brittany!
100 days since speaking out, Brittany Higgins has served as a lightning rod. After bravely telling her story about parliamentary culture, others have come forward.
As at 17th of May 2021, 40 reports have been received by the AFP since the 24th of February relating to 19 different allegations.
As for Miss Higgins' alleged perpetrator,
a brief of evidence is likely to be provided to the ACT Director of Public Prosecutions in the coming weeks.
Of the multiple inquiries launched after Brittany Higgins came forward, one of them by senior public servant Stephanie Foster promises significant change to the way this building operates. She's recommended an independent and confidential complaints process for staff. In a workplace where MPs have the right to hire and fire without question, it would offer a valuable layer of protection.
Saxon Mullins' case was the catalyst for this reform, and she joins me now. Saxon, thank you, and I know it's been a big day. This is what you've been fighting for since 2018 when you went public with your story. How does it feel to know these changes are on the way and that your story was the catalyst for this?
I'm honestly still in a bit of shock. You know, I sort of, after the Law Reform Commission's final report and them not recommending affirmative consent, we thought the hurdle had been a bit higher than we could jump. But I'm really, really surprised but really grateful to see that we've legislated for affirmative consent. And I think the fact that it was my case that sort of sparked this review, it makes me feel really proud that I was able to come forward, but also acknowledging that, you know, a survivor of different circumstances, a survivor of colour, wouldn't be afforded the same opportunities. So there's still so much work to do, but I mean, it's amazing for this to have happened.
Yeah. And education is key here. Affirmative consent is going to have to be taught. How would you explain it to a young person, say a 16-year-old?
I think, well, when we talk about this education, I think it's really important to see it as this holistic process. So relationships and sexuality education needs to start really young in an age-appropriate way and continue throughout the schooling period and throughout one's life. I think, you know, it's really important to contextualize all of that stuff and make sure that we're teaching the right things at the right times. But, you know, to explain affirmative consent, I think it's a lot easier than maybe sometimes we make out for it to be. So it's just an ongoing conversation between two people. So if you want to have sex with somebody, you just say, hey, would you like to have sex? Hey, is it all right if I do this? You know, if you're making out with someone, you say, oh, is it okay if I touch you here? Does that feel good? It's that ongoing conversation. And I think, you know, anyone who is thinking about having sexual encounters or has previously had sexual encounters, you know that there is space to have those conversations. And it's really easy to be able to, you know, incorporate them into how you regularly have sexual encounters, and so it's not as sort of complex as some people make it out to be.
Yeah, so this change will be introduced in the next session of Parliament, according to the Attorney-General, but there will be at least a 6-month lead time. That's important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, you know, we still have to make sure that the community understands what these guidelines are. We need to make sure our police, all of that, our whole justice system understands what these changes are.
How will affirmative consent change the prosecution of cases in the courts?
Well, hopefully it means that there is a little bit less onus on you know, possibly what a victim has said or done. And if you're relying on this specific defence, you need to show what you said or what you did. And hopefully it just means we capture a few more of those cases where, you know, someone has just assumed whether someone else was consenting or not.
Do you think that victims or survivors will now feel emboldened to report any cases, for one, but also to take it through the courts?
I think how a survivor chooses to seek their justice is it comes from a lot of factors. So I think, you know, maybe 1% this might have helped them feel more confident to go through the legal system, but a lot of people can't go to the police. A lot of people choose not to go through the legal system. So, you know, I think it does have an impact in whether people will choose to go through, but I think there is a huge amount of other factors that are included in that.
The Attorney-General also spoke today about this research project that's going to be launched. It's going to look at survivors, their experience from the time they first report any case, right through to the end of a court case, if it gets that far, to see where things can be improved. As someone with a lived experience, do you have any suggestions where you think it can?
I mean, there's lots of places it can be improved, and I think it's really important to listen to those survivors who have been through that system, because I think a lot of the time we put these, you know, law reform changes through and that's it, whereas I think it's really important to understand from someone who has first-hand experience how that actually affects people. And I mean, there's so many places that it could be improved. We're still, you know, in the discussion around specialist courts. We're still in all of those discussions. So, I mean, there's huge opportunity for some big changes, but it's a really good starting point.
Finally, Saxon, obviously you fronted these news conferences in Sydney today. You've done back-to-back interviews since. You're doing one right now. Have you had a time to yourself to reflect on how profound this is?
I honestly don't think I've fully
such are the cases. We are very
accepted
glad
it
to
yet
see that
or come
new
to
laws
terms
are
with
being
it yet.
introduced in
as little was done as
Australia.
was possible.
Now we quickly jump on to the
to
Canada,
make it
where
look
military
like the report
sexual
had been
assaults were reported
responded
by
to
many
without
females,
any
and
real
specifically
change.
3
An
high-ranking
admission from
officers were
Canada's top defense
involved in this,
bureaucrat
and this
that
is a story
recommendations from the
developing right
last
now with
report
the
into
Canada
sexual
government.
misconduct
And let's
were
take a look
not
at this
fully
clip.
implemented.
Let's have a
It was
listen.
treated almost as a checklist. And I think it's time that we were just honest about that.
6 years ago, former Supreme Court Justice Marie Deschamps found a highly sexualized culture.
The problem of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the armed forces is real.
She recommended changes, including an independent reporting center.
We need to adopt a more deliberate approach.
Former Chief of Defense Staff Jonathan Vance launched Operation Honor to make it stop. But now Vance and 3 other senior leaders are under investigation over claims of their own inappropriate behavior. Thomas says the report needed more civilian oversight, and there wasn't enough real change.
No structural change, no legislative change, no outside the department, outside the Canadian Armed Forces reporting, those kinds of things that Madame Deschamps emphasized.
That stands in stark contrast to what the military told Parliament.
From our perspective, we believe that we have achieved all those 10 recommendations. However, that is our opinion.
The government has now commissioned another report. Canada's acting top soldier says it needs to be taken seriously.
We absolutely have to embrace external recommendations and not be defensive about this. We need to own this.
Why do you think that sexualized culture persists in the Canadian military?
I don't know. Is it a question of power dynamics that we need a much better understanding of the use and the abuse of power? Is it the exclusionary aspects of parts of our culture that I've talked about before? I don't know.
It's about power. I think it's about the abuse of authority. And I think that there are many officers, male officers and male leaders of all ranks in the Canadian Armed Forces who don't abuse their power.
The Deputy Minister says the institution can be reformed. The next report into misconduct is expected to take at least a year. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ghislaine Maxwell's life in prison isn't going so well. She's giving the Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Center 1 star for its overall amenities and customer service. For months, the disgraced British socialite / former girlfriend / accused procurer of young girls for the late Jeffrey Epstein has been complaining about the way she's been treated behind bars. Now, prisoners don't usually have a lot of pull with management over their living conditions, and with the prosecution doubling down with new charges and a postponed trial date, her new normal isn't going to get any better anytime soon. Let's talk about the bizarre claims she's making about her living conditions and the new charges she's facing. I'm Chris with True Crime Recaps. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you all so much for taking some time out of your day to check out this video. If you like getting all the crime in half the time, please do us the huge favor of hitting like and subscribe. It only takes about a half a second, but it means the world to us. So thanks in advance. And now, on with the recap. Starting with a description of Ghislaine's day-to-day life in prison from her brother, Ian Maxwell, to the BBC.
She is in effective isolation in a cell that measures 6 foot by 9 foot and which includes a bed, concrete bed, and a toilet. There is no natural light. She is under 24-hour round-the-clock surveillance with 10 cameras, including one that moves and tracks her movements. And on top of that, there are 4 guards that are looking at her, and presumably there is another guard looking at the camera feeds. She's not allowed to move into the corners of her cell, and she is not allowed to be within 2.5 feet of the cell door. That is her existence every day. The water that is provided through the prison is brown, and the food that she's given is very highly microwaved and basically inedible.
And that's just for starters. He also said she's losing her hair, having trouble with her eyesight, and struggling to concentrate. The detention center's response to her claims? They say the whole thing smells, literally. Guards claim she doesn't flush the toilet in her cell, while she says the horrible smell is actually rotting pipes. But her toilet issues don't stop with the smell alone. In a letter to the judge reported on by the Daily Mail, she claimed a senior guard stood knee to knee with her while she sat on the commode. So, that's odd. And what's the deal with the black eye she's sporting in this picture? And she claims she has no idea how she got it, but if she had to take a guess, which she does, she thinks the bruise might be from shielding her eyes from the light so often. Or, at least that's what she told her lawyers, according to the BBC. Is there a doctor in the house? I mean, is it medically possible to give yourself a black eye that way? She also said that guards wake her up every 15 minutes by shining a flash/strobe light into her cell, which is seriously interfering with her REM cycle. Her lawyers say she's been using an old sock as an eye mask to try and sleep through the night. Clearly, the prison where she's being held is pulling out all the stops to make sure she doesn't take her own life, like her former friend and mentor supposedly did in August of 2019, something her lawyers are calling the Epstein effect. A medical examiner ruled Epstein died of suicide by hanging, but a doctor hired to conduct an independent autopsy says he was helped along into the great hereafter and didn't tie a sheet around his own neck. Either way, Ghislaine is now in the position of being the only one left standing, and from her perspective, things have gone from bad to worse since her arrest. In March 2021, new charges were filed against her, alleging that she groomed a 14-year-old girl with shopping trips and other treats in order to coax her into giving Epstein and his powerful friends naked massages between 2001 and 2004. With this fourth minor victim added to her indictment, her trial date has been pushed from July to the fall of 2021. Whereas the other charges she's facing are for basically the same things, but during a different time period, 1994 through 1997. A new lawsuit was also recently filed by a real estate broker in Florida claiming that she was brutally violated by Epstein at his Palm Beach mansion with the assistance of Ghislaine. According to The Independent, quote, after the alleged abuse, the pair reportedly drove the woman to pick up her 8-year-old son and stopped the car at a large body of water that was infested with alligators. Epstein then ushered the plaintiff to the body of water and told her in explicit detail that, as had happened to other girls in the past, she would end up in this body of water and be devoured by the alligators should she ever reveal what Epstein had done to her. After that, the woman says she was trafficked to other men, including a judge in South Florida. The woman was 26 at the time, but looked much younger. She says the pair told these men that she was 17, and if she didn't go along with it, she claims they threatened her with deportation. She's from Turkey. The same article written by Gustav Killander says she was forced to have vaginal reconstructive surgery. It was carried out in a wealthy person's home by a man with a Russian accent in order to create the false impression that she was a virgin for a high-profile client. And now she has permanent injuries, according to the lawsuit. Speaking of Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, a developer recently tore down the property, which included a main house with 6 bedrooms, a staff house, and a pool. He plans to build a new mansion in its place, one which will have a lot less bad karma than the old one. Epstein's Manhattan townhouse also sold recently for about $50 million. The funds from the sale of both properties go into the Victims Fund. He also had an apartment in Paris, a ranch in New Mexico, and the notorious private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands known to locals as Pedophile Island. The island and Epstein's many properties around the world were regular stops on Ghislaine's jet-setting itinerary for years. How is she adjusting to life in a cell? Outside of the atrocities she's been complaining about, she's also reading a lot, according to realghislaine.com, which is the website her family set up to educate the public about her innocence. Current favorite titles include The Oregon Trail by Rinker Buck, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and The Black Swan by Nicholas Taleb. Her life in prison is certainly a far cry from her upbringing as the favorite daughter of media tycoon Robert Maxwell. At one time, he was one of the richest people in the world with the personality and ego to match. But his death remains a mystery to this day. On November 5th, 1991, his naked body was found floating in the water. When he went missing, he'd been on his yacht named the Lady Ghislaine. The three pathologists who examined Robert's dead body came to three different conclusions, ranging from heart attack to accidental drowning. According to an article in The Independent, there were many theories about why he died. One theory claimed he was an Israeli spy who was about to spill state secrets. The other theory was that he took his own life before being sent to prison for a Ponzi scheme he was accused of running to the tune of £400 million. Funds he leached from his company's pension funds, which he put toward propping up his other failing companies. And the final theory about what happened is simply that he accidentally fell overboard. According to The Guardian, the man who was the first to see his body is convinced it was an accident. He's quoted as saying, "He used to get up at night and pee over the stern of the ship. Everybody knew this. The railings were wire, so I think he lost his balance because he was very top-heavy. I don't think he committed suicide." Ghislaine never really recovered from the loss of her father, although by the time it happened, she had already met Jeffrey Epstein at a party in New York in the late 80s. Just in time, as it turned out. Her fortunes were failing, and Epstein had the means to give her the lifestyle to which she wanted to become accustomed again. But what was he getting out of it? Well, in addition to the underage girls she's accused of sending to him, he also got the benefit of her many social connections. For example, thanks to her, he was introduced to Prince Andrew, and we all know how that friendship turned out, thanks to allegations from Virginia Roberts Giuffre that she was told to sleep with the prince more than once, an accusation he strongly denies. An investment banker who attended dinner parties Ghislaine and Epstein hosted in New York told the New York Times she seemed to be half ex-girlfriend, half employee, half best friend and fixer. She was above all said to be the lady of the house. But like the poster says, she's keeping calm.
So we see, the world over females are protesting, and there needs to be massive change in the laws, specifically the explicit sexual consent law required. Another book, very good book by Urmi Bhattacharya, which was released recently. This depicts how the mindset of Indian males, alpha males, work towards the consent and how they take the metaphor consent to sexually assault females openly in India. And this is a very good book. It interviews at least 5 females in depth and narrating their traumatic experience and how their metaphor consent was taken up and how they were basically sexually assaulted and enslaved in India. Another good book which was released recently, and this is another exhaustive research done by the undercover agent who is also a journalist. This report compiles complete evidence, anecdotal evidence, and the empirical evidences of various females who were survivors, who were victims of sexual assaults based on the, you can call it a metaphor consent, where, alpha males from India, massively predator population, you call the human trafficking empire, are exploiting, enslaving, and trapping, and basically stalking females every day, now and then. And this crisis, such a huge crisis, that despite many books being released and a lot of accolades being given to such females who are raising the concern, but the crime rate towards the female in India is not coming down. I think the law needs to change to have explicit sexual consent in India, which is just like what's happening in Australia recently or Sweden. Denmark already has explicit sexual consent law. This is so much required in India right now to bring down this crime. And because this is spilling all across, once these pedophiles, or you call it hyperactive males, who are sexually hyperactive, they turn into marriages, they have a complete decimation. You also see a lot of new pandemic develop, which is basically father-daughter rape pandemic. It's quite prevalent in India, and it's so massive, it's so gruesome, it's so enormous that only 10% is being reported in India as a father-daughter rape. And this pandemic is itself much more major pandemic, more cause of suicides and deaths of female than what we are seeing with COVID-19, folks. If you look at it seriously, this is one of the biggest concern, and that's why these books are being released in India. We got to take a deeper look, and hopefully Indian government or India system will come up to some solution, just like what Australia is introducing new laws for the consent, and Denmark has it, Sweden has it, and even recently, Pakistan also introduced tougher laws under the leadership of Imran Khan, PM of Pakistan, where they're trying to put up female safety as number one priority for the Pakistan government. So hopefully India government will take some heed towards what's the development in going across the globe and how females are facing. Basically, I hope India females start to mass protest, because there are 666 plus million females in India who never mass protest. Folks, last protest they did was 2012 in the case of Nirbhaya. This was, you can say, sexual assault on wheel. And if Indian females don't mass protest, then I don't think the laws are going to get changed, or they're going to get the justice from the Indian lawmakers. So anyways, folks, let's quick jump to the next topic, which we see developing as major storm, a geomagnetic storm hitting Earth. And recently we've seen a lot of new flares from the sun, and sun has been spewing a lot of C-class, but recently M-class has also been observed. So these M-class flares are quite phenomenal, and I hope to see them coming up in next 2-3 days, 4 days more. So you can take a look at this view graph. You can see this this sunspot developing, and the flares. Yes, you can see here. It's just like, it's like a buzzing thing, it's like constantly ongoing. And I think in time to come, this for next 2-3 days, because it's squarely facing Earth right now, it's going to be phenomenal. And we are going to receive this flare M-class and C-class for May 25th, 26th and 27th. So that was my prediction, folks. And I am seeing already upheavals on Earth to come, and a lot of cataclysmic changes are going to come, specifically the water-related disasters. Yes, the water-related disasters catastrophe is coming. Just prepare for it. We'll see tsunamis, we'll see water-related crises, be it hurricanes, tornadoes, twisters, whatnot. It's going to come, folks. Just prepare for it. The whole next month is quite critical as I see it. So the last week of May and the 2 weeks of June are quite critical as I see it. I'm already predicting it. And just stay close, stay tuned, stay healthy. Try to be, more protective towards your spiritual being, and have a good mind, body, and spirits to stay healthy. Okay, folks, stay tuned. Till next session, we meet. I take your leave. Thanks. Bye.